Hello, and welcome to Wednesdays with Willa. I am your host, Willa White, and this is my weekly podcast show that airs on Wednesday mornings at 10 a.m. Eastern. And you can like and subscribe and follow on Willa White Medium so you're alerted to all the different events and podcasts that I air. I want to encourage you to also subscribe and like my YouTube channel. And this episode will also go out on Blog Talk Radio. .com/Lilydale Radio. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce my special guest for this week's episode is my mother, Bonnie White. Thanks for being here, Mom.
Thank you for having me, Willa. I always enjoy coming to your show.
Thank you.
Feel grateful to be invited.
It's always a good time, and people love watching us talk together and have spiritual conversations. People write into me all the time and let me know that.
Mm-hmm.
And this is year 5 of Wednesdays with Willa. So my mother's been on the show quite a few times, and you can look back at the archive videos of my shows on Willa White Medium, but also on my YouTube channel. And you just have to type in Willa White and Bonnie White, and you will have it. My mother is a spirit artist, which is a very special form of mediumship. To do spirit art, and does charcoal drawings and pictures emerge, but also larger paintings. Yes. She does pastels and acrylics, which are much longer sessions. And you've been a medium for decades and decades. She's also a registered Lilydale medium and an amazing mentor to me throughout all the years of my mediumship. To share this journey with you has really been a wonderful blessing.
We have always done a lot of talking.
Oh, we sure have. About spirit and what happens.
And it's so much fun to talk about spirit. So
it's what our family does.
And so what do we do for fun?
You can also look at the past shows with my father, Bill White, who's also well-versed in spiritual understandings. And it's certainly a foundation for our particular family. Mm-hmm. And today we're going to share some concepts of regarding the divine. And so today's show title is Look Unto God. And my mother has some wonderful things that she's going to share, and insights and some book excerpts as well. So it'll be a very inspirational show today. So what should we start with first?
You know, it's interesting to me that the principles we have in our church, the Church of the Living Spirit,
that's our home church,
and I also attend the City of Light, and the principles are very similar. But the major thing that they say first of all is, we believe in God.
Yes.
And guess what? A few days ago, I met someone who said they didn't believe in God.
Which, of course, is shocking to someone.
It's shocking to someone who has been, just working with the afterlife and working with the guides and the angels and all these helpers we have.
Yeah, so obvious to us.
It's so, yes, and we forget that there are people who say, and I said, well, wow. Why wouldn't you understand that there's a God? And she said, because I think if you believe in God, you have to believe in evil. And then I went over the edge.
Yeah.
It's like, where does that come from? Right?
Yes.
So because
it's absolutism.
Yes. So God has always been such an inspiration, and the idea of who do you turn to? You turn to God. You don't turn to evil forces.
Right.
And what good is it going to be doing? Especially if you happen to be in some.
Mm-hmm.
You don't turn to God for an evil portion, please.
No.
And you don't turn to God to be instilled with fear. I mean, it's very different to me, the thought that somebody could actually be a grown person late in life and believe that. But then, of course,
she doesn't see how God has been working in her life. She doesn't
no, she
see
can't.
that. And it's what a sad thing, because you're thinking of all those opportunities for her to have said, you know what, God did work with me in my life in this way. I felt the angelic forces in my life at
Yes.
this particular moment.
She might start to remember
Right.
some if there was time, but there was no time to even talk to her
Explore the
about it.
conversation, because it was
Because
just a
we were
bomb.
we were at a place with a lot of people there, and I never try to infringe on a person's privacy or what they're talking about with me. And it's yeah, so I hope we get a chance to talk to her some more.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
I'm really looking forward to seeing her again.
Right, and exploring
Because I
that.
feel, oh, wow.
Yeah, because God shows up in our lives in so many incredible ways. Personal life, and in our role as mediums too.
Yes,
We
all
feel
the
the
time.
God force. We open with a prayer. We
Mhm.
end with a prayer. It's all in that sacred context of helping people connect with their loved ones in spirit, soul to soul, because they are still living beings, as are we.
Right.
And that soul and life continues on. And so it's something it's a bit more evident to us, and maybe even to all of you, that understanding of God. But let's lean into this understanding of what it means to really look unto God. And there's that understanding of what it's not looking unto me.
No.
It's looking unto God. Let's talk
Right.
about that difference to start with.
You mean when a person looks unto themselves?
Yes.
Right.
For their own.
For their own.
For
They begin to check themselves against other human endeavors, like money, good looks. I'm trying to think of something. What you have, who you own. I was reading a Carlos Castaneda excerpt from one of his books, and his guru, I guess, Don Juan, his mentor, was telling him about his early life and how he was told early on that because he wasn't beautiful and he wasn't good, he'd have to be in control of everything, right, in order to be invited to the party.
The party of life,
the party
and inclusion
in other words, to be wanted by others. Because beautiful people, his mentor was saying, beautiful people have it made, right? Everybody wants to be with them.
Sure.
Good people have it made. They're always welcome at every party. But if you're neither of those two things, he kept telling his mentor kept telling him, you're going to have to take control of everything, and you have to do whatever you can. You have to scream, you have to yell, you have to make yourself impossible. And besides that, you will never be invited. So you have to sneak in through the window.
What an awful thought.
What a thought to have your guide tell you that when you're a little kid.
Sure.
So it's like there's something going on in people's lives that they are afraid. They're afraid they're not going to be getting popular.
That idea of perfection.
The idea of being popular in school, the idea of being having wealth or something to really showy. There's so many ways that people are trying to be the best.
And ego-centered
and
in that way.
Look in the mirror. Well, the whole concept of the one that's looking in the mirror and then discovers that there's somebody more beautiful than she is.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
All those fairy tales that are impelling us.
So let's flip that on its head. Let's say, you're looking unto yourself in that way, and there's that feeling of, in that self-centered way, not centered in yourself.
No,
that's a very different thing. But it's centered on what the have and have not.
The materialistic
outlook is very present.
That's right.
So it's flipping that on its head, and if we say we're going to look unto God, let's steer into that process.
Okay, to look into God, you are looking into the highest portion of your soul.
Mhm.
For one thing, we believe in God, yes. But then here comes the second principle. People say, well, yeah, what's God, right? And then the second principle is God is all there is. So that says everything, so it's not like there's a whole portion that's only this little bit that belongs to God.
Right.
Like some people think Sunday belongs to God or Saturday.
Mhm.
And some people think that God is good and everything else is materialistic and not good. There's all this
Well, we just
separation.
described that.
divisiveness.
We
Yes.
describe the separation,
Yeah.
right?
So
then what?
how are you saying, how do we get in touch with God?
Yeah, let's steering into because you just talked about the separation of those things.
Yes.
Let's talk about the unity of them.
Yes. So then in order to get to the unity, you have to approach it from within, as far as I can tell. Because the eyes that are the eyes that we generally use to look at the world, this includes artists like myself,
And we've done a whole show about that.
Yeah.
If people want to know about inner vision more.
Yes. So those eyes are not the eyes by which you perceive God. It's the inner nature that is able to perceive that. And so it's kind of an evolution in a way, because we think that the physical evolution is the important thing.
Sure.
But we forget that the inner evolution of our souls and our connection and our ability to communicate, even with other people.
Right.
I mean, between you and me, we're not communicating only on a physical plane.
That's right. It's a spiritual connection.
There's a spiritual connection going on. And when you find that spiritual connection with another person, it becomes very evident. You suddenly have it and you know what it is. It's like falling in love too.
That's right.
You suddenly have another experience that has to do with love. Well, God is love is one of the major ideas that goes with God.
True.
For one thing. It's the connectivity of the universe even.
Right.
And so you can't get anywhere without that. You can't say, okay, I only love one person, myself, and I'm in charge of myself. He gave me myself, therefore I'm it, right?
And you're not it.
You're not,
You're not it. So
it doesn't take
I know
long to
you've
find
been
that out.
reading in the one book again about this understanding of looking unto yourself. The self with a capital S, because there's the
Divine self.
That is the lowercase s, and that would be more of the ego materialistic self. And then there's the self with a capital S. That's why you know truth with a capital T, God with a capital G, self with a capital S. Let's talk to them about self. And I know there was a section about
where is
Jerusalem that we had been researching together. We had been looking at the concept of how that is used on a biblical level, but also how that could be understood on a spiritual level. Yeah, so you can find that section in the book about Jerusalem.
Yeah, I can't remember what page it's on. Actually.
But
oh, here it is.
Yeah, I need to find it right away.
Okay.
Because that's important.
Something, it says, in the pathway thereof, there is no death. And that's a Solomon quote.
Yes.
Something falls down over the pathway of the heaven-sent vision. It is the Alkahest of the Hindus.
Right. So my mom's talked about Alkahest before on the show. Alkahest is it's a tangible, etheric energy that you can actually feel coming over you, and it helps you merge with that state of grace.
That's right. And you can get through that easily through prayer.
Yes.
And meditation, or just meditation, or just prayer. But it's also it's the Alkahest of the Hindus, the grace of the Hebrews.
Right.
And it dissolves and disperses all that is unlike the nature and operation of the high source from which it sprang forth. So in other words, when you get that feeling, if you're praying for somebody, if you're praying for yourself, if you're praying for enlightenment, if you're praying for receiving some consciousness, and all of a sudden something changes through your whole body. You can feel it changing. It's like a vibration.
It's an alteration of the vibrational force.
It's almost like a fine mist.
Yes. Yes.
And then you know, well, that's the stuff that you have been looking unto God for, to please help me to dissolve the things about me that are separatists, that don't seem to be in harmony with my world. You know, you can suddenly, some days you can wake up and you don't feel at all harmonious with the world. You feel like you're out of sorts. And if you pray, and that suddenly will turn that feeling into joy. And you can feel it. You can feel the working of that God stuff just melting and dissolving all that irksomeness that might be within you at the moment.
Some people would say it's a washing away. Some people would say it's a dissolving away.
Right.
And it's casting out of fear and things that are things that would be unqualified energy.
So in the biblical terms that this H.B. Jeffries in his book, and he was living and working in the early 1920s.
Right.
So he was saying that there's a remitting power, that's a changing power.
Yes.
That is taking away those awful feelings that you have, even about yourself or someone else or anything. And you have to start with yourself. You can't start with your neighbor. You know, love your neighbor as yourself, but you can't start with that. You have to start with what's going on in you.
Yes.
And sometimes God is leading you through these inner visions that you get. You get an inner vision of what it could be like.
It's almost like a hopeful space, but as soon as you understand that that's the truth, then it moves out of hope and into happening.
Yes. And you can see the workings of God in your own self. Then you're ready to look at your neighbor and look at the highest part of him, not the miserable person that is your neighbor, or not the one that's always in pain, not the one that's always complaining, not the one blah blah blah. You can name a zillion things that could be the one that did this to me or that to me or whatever. You can look at that and say, I know that if I have this in myself, this God aspect, this peace, my neighbor has that, and I can talk to that, even if I can't talk to
their conscious self.
I can talk to them. And it turns out that talking silently is equally effective as talking with your actual words.
Yes.
Which is really amazing.
Which is why it's important to not just be grinding in your mind about someone or something.
Yes, if you're grinding,
stop the grinding.
Right, that's right. The grinding, I like that.
There's a grinding, a grist mill that's inside of a person. And if you go into that, yes, the alkahest, the grace is coming upon you, but then whatever comes out of your particular mill, that you are sending that out on a silent vibrational force as well. So let's talk about the Jerusalem part of that, so we can explain a little bit more about this concept of remission.
Well, you have to say, you have to agree that where you have been spending your time is not in the will of God, but is in my own will. I want such and such to happen.
Yeah, it's a forcing of your will.
It's forcing your will upon your life and upon those you love. And you're saying you're doing it for their good.
Right.
Right. And you can see that if only they would change, everything would be better.
Sure.
Right?
Mhm.
But that's not necessarily where it begins. The Jerusalem, the self, beginning at Jerusalem.
So why is Jerusalem in the Bible? Yes, it's a location and it has a lot of spiritual
Mhm.
and religious historical significance. However, the word Jerusalem has its own kind of context, and it comes from a verb, in terms of its Hebrew connotation, which means to throw or cast out or shoot, and it also can mean to fear.
Mhm.
And then it's also based on that verb shalom,
Mhm.
shalom, if I'm pronouncing it
That's peace,
incorrectly,
right?
which means to make whole or complete.
Ah,
So here we go into that concept of completion of who you are,
right,
so that you're throwing out fear,
right.
and that so you have Jerusalem. What an interesting word. That it means in awe of peace. It means teaching peace, and
Mhm.
it means to make whole or complete. And it has the connotations of making you a whole self with a
Wow,
capital S.
I like that.
Yeah, so that's what's so fascinating when I was looking into the
Yeah,
etymology of the name Jerusalem, and how important that peace, and when that peace that comes, that denotes the completeness, the wholeness, the soundness of something. So really kind of fascinating. But yes, let's go on with,
and then
because the Jerusalem means the self when you read it in the Bible.
and the tendency that people have, the way they tend to use their inner eye, is to focus in one direction more than another.
Mhm.
It's just a common thing for all mankind, they say.
Mhm.
And whenever your vision is changed, the old conditions built up by the former direction fall away and new ones take their places. For, and this is a quote, that thou seest, that thou beest.
Mhm.
So the things that have fallen away, that is the remitting,
Right.
that is the letting go. So as you remit, let go,
Mhm.
and you embrace the higher consciousness,
Right.
the higher levels, the love,
Mhm.
the other things that have been in place in former conditions suddenly deflate, disappear,
Yes.
dissolve.
Because the vision is changed, and in the process of remission, you've received almost like this gift, I guess you could call it, this
Right.
gift of peace in the moment.
Right. And all people want remission.
Which is a form of liberty. It's a form of freedom. And that's why in Buddhism, when they talk about freedom from these idea of the material, this freedom of the from material world, or the illusion,
Mm-hmm.
right? We're having
Right.
liberty or freedom from the illusion
Right.
of suffering.
And it says here, everybody wants evil set aside for them. Who doesn't?
Right. Oh, let's talk about that. This is a really important part. Paying attention.
Okay. They all want matter with its laws to stand aside for them. They all want fullness without lack,
Mhm.
without deprivation, without loss. They want completeness. We all want hurts and anguish set aside for them by the divine hand. That's why we go for healing.
That's why we go for healing. And we want the Red Sea parted for us.
That's right. They all
We
want
want
sin
it parted for us.
with its sickness and death put far from them.
That's right.
And that is these are the five great darknesses that accompany all who look downward with the inner all-achieving eye. So the inner eye is an all-achieving eye. And if you're constantly looking at the bad side of things,
Mhm.
that is the darkness that comes upon you.
Yeah, it creates this darkness and emphasizes, it reverberates through your being. And that's why looking unto God is the understanding of looking upward.
Right.
Because the Alkahest is coming
Mhm.
down.
And light and freedom come from the source,
Mhm.
the divine source.
Mhm.
And people forget that. They've even got angry, God being angry all the time. You know,
too
like
have that.
what kind of source is that? Does that just justify you to be angry? No. You know,
Right.
it's just
So we have to move out of the concept of the wrathful God and
mhm,
into the concept of the compassionate force. But that's a loving and firm thing. You know, unconditional love means that you're going to be loving and firm with someone.
mhm,
And ultimately, that's an aspect of this.
right. God, the unnameable, is the cause, the divine cause that spirit is, but is himself more free than spirit. Spirit is the messenger.
Yes.
So here we have it. And you know, when you think of it, I read somewhere that the heavenly host is the angelic body of each person that lives. That's millions and millions and millions of angelic beings are right here with us all the time and have taken human bodies.
Like the heavenly host.
Like the heavenly host. So they're everywhere. So it's connecting with that. And when you're looking up to God, you are pulling in the angels of other people into their bodies. Well, healing is a practice of pulling in the divine resource that is right there, so close, but needs to be pulled in and awakened in each person. So it's like we walk around not even knowing that we are in connection.
Yes.
With the entire divine, because if God is everywhere.
It's almost like that concept of Wi-Fi, and you're thinking, well, I have to have a passcode to get into the Wi-Fi, and Wi-Fi is not working, and I can't get my phone to work, my computer to work. Or, you know, I feel frustrated.
Yeah.
And what you start to recognize is that this understanding of the source means that you will always be connected. It just whether we feel blocked in those ways. I think we get so used to feeling frustrated or feel so used to being blocked that we think that there is then a block with the source.
Exactly. You think that God has turned his back on us. That kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah. And so it's God can destroy the mountains that you have built up between you and him.
Yes.
And so there might be mountains of ideas. Like people say, that's just a myth. Okay.
Yes, they do.
Yeah, God's just a myth.
God's just a myth, the mythology of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And they feel self-confident. But then all of a sudden, if they have an experience, almost everyone has had an experience of a higher nature. Almost everyone, if you talk to them long enough, they'll reveal to you something that has happened to them since birth. Well, first of all, they've been born. You know what I mean? It's huge.
Right. A
little tiny baby.
Sure.
And now, and they're just glowing radiant little babies, and then they grow up and they get to decide.
They do get to decide.
And they make choices. So we're just trying to keep the choices open for people. And I have been reading this book by The Life Beyond Death.
With Arthur Ford.
By Arthur Ford.
He was a big time medium.
He was born in the 1800s and he died in 1971. And he was very in touch with, he just started having these things happen.
Right.
You know, some people have to be born into a family that does that or whatever. But he just started unexpectedly having knowings, you know, spontaneous knowings. And it was disturbing because it's confusing. Like, why does it happen to me? He had so many questions.
Sure.
And the ultimate goal of his life was to help people to understand the afterlife and what happens there and what happens to you when you die. And he had already had experiences of that, dying and returning. So he wasn't afraid of death.
Right. He had his near-death experiences.
Yes.
And that fueled
Yes.
more understandings
But
about some of
and
this.
he was a person who spoke everywhere, but he was also connected with the AA.
Right. The Alcoholics
He was an
Anonymous.
alcoholic, and he was in touch with the one who started that. His
Mhm.
name is Bill. I don't
Yeah, I
know.
can't remember his last name. right
Anyway,
now. But
so I
Arthur
find
Ford became a trance medium, and so a trance medium means that they allow spirit to speak directly through them,
right,
and things were recorded, things were noted down, and accuracies were
but in his
connected.
book, he goes back to ancient times.
Mhm.
Spiritualism, mediumship
Yes,
has
ancient.
been around for ancient times, and he points out all kinds of biblical Old Testament and New Testament relationships with mediumship
Mhm, mhm.
and the happenings of spirit.
Yes.
He also talks about the Odyssey,
Mm,
and
mhm.
they're having seances in the Odyssey, the famous Greek, right?
Right.
And I mean, he's pointing out all these points
Yeah.
that have been with us forever, and all the different religions all have the same
Some
afterlife.
aspect.
And then came science.
And then came
And so
science.
then science came and said, no, we are not having anything to do with anything that cannot be seen with the five senses. This is what he
Until
said.
they got a microscope that could go far enough into the quartz.
Yeah, but you can still see with your eye through the little glass lens, which is a physical thing.
Right.
And so on. So, but all this time, we're by looking back to some of the things that people were into,
Mhm.
and knowing that they were having seances,
Mhm.
not science, seance.
Science.
I'm so close. And so yeah, so anyway, so his life work
Mhm.
was to do this book that helps to people get through their grief and their questions.
And understanding there is life beyond death, and the divine is working in their lives and in the lives of their loved ones.
And their helpers. And he was a bit of loss, and then he got his helper. His helper's name was Fletcher,
Mhm.
and he helped organize the people. I know many mediums have someone on the other side that they can depend on to help them sort through about who's coming to them.
Sure.
I mean, it's pretty overwhelming when you start thinking about what spirit has to do to create a situation for you to have your reading.
Yeah, there's a lot of coordination behind the scenes in terms of your loved ones in spirit,
Yeah.
Your helpers, your team, and
Mhm.
also the medium's team.
Right.
And then ultimately, of course, you and the medium.
And then I remember reading once he said, this one guy was so upset because he wanted Arthur Ford to bring through Socrates for him.
Oh.
And he said, can you bring through Socrates? So Arthur Ford says, yes, I can bring through Socrates, but you have to be the one that knows whether it's him or not. You have to recognize him.
Okay.
And if you think that he's going to be the same as he was back in your cognition about Socrates, you could be wrong.
Wow.
Isn't
That's
that
another
wild? That's
layer.
another layer, totally other layer.
Yeah,
Right?
that's a different level of
So
thinking. That's
because
right.
you
because they do
expect
change.
everybody to be the same thing.
Right, but they evolve on the
They
other
have
side.
been changing throughout their other life. And
So it can't just be about their memories of this little blip of time that they spent on the earth plane. There's other stuff going on here.
yes,
And let that never be forgotten
That's
in your
right.
dealings with them. That they
That's
are
right.
spirit evolution, spirit progression is,
Right.
is a constant process.
And we all are in the process of it all the time.
Mhm.
So, you know, and the medium, as a medium, he was always developing.
Sure.
So I find it fascinating to read books that other mediums have
Oh yeah.
written about
There's a
their
lot to
lives.
learn there.
And so, and it's very comforting.
Mhm.
It's very, very comforting.
Did you have something you were going to share directly from that book then?
Oh man, I've marked so many pages. I don't know.
We both do these things.
Oh, this is the one about Confucius.
Oh yeah, in China in early times, they had the belief, of course, of the yin and the yang, that understanding of utilizing and cooperating with those forces, called the Tao, or otherwise known as the Way. And we have that understanding of the ancestor worship, the harmony of that. And we get to this idea of what Confucius is summarizing in terms of his teaching. And he says,
live a good life in this world, and the next one will take care of itself. There's a lot of truth in that.
There is.
Now, his idea was that a person who was in harmony with the great creative principles of the universe would be equally at home in all spheres, now and hereafter. Now, once in a moment of danger, he said, heaven produced the power that is in me. What have I to fear?
What have I to fear?
Heaven has produced everything within me. How can I possibly be afraid?
That's right. It goes into that space of looking unto God, the divine force.
Although he never spoke in detail of the life beyond, he endorsed the traditional Chinese practices of keeping in spiritual touch with ancestors,
which is spirit contact.
And then, and in our own time, probably people remember the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and Jung and all the stuff, How to Do It book. It's a how to do it on the subject of dying.
Yes.
So there are all these explorations, both from the East and the West, that have been going on forever.
They have.
And they just have to be recognized, because you can't just say, oh, well, that's back then. Right?
Right. If we learn from what's happened in the past, we can extrapolate upon it, and also move into living our best understanding in this particular life that we are given.
That's right.
And that we have chosen to some degree, right?
Yeah.
And that idea of moving into that vision, that altering that vision of the limited self and moving into the divine self, capital S.
Right.
Is such an essential part of that. And what other things did you want to share for this particular episode?
I'm trying to remember what all I marked, but I do know that he has a big area about Dante.
Yes, and my parents have been studying Dante big time this year.
So much, it's fascinating. Now that we know what we know about the spiritual planes, and mediumship is not just about bringing a message about cookies. It's about the afterlife. Sure. The fact that there is an ongoing process, and what we do is not for naught. It's for the good of everybody. And so when we just have a discovery of guides, angels, whatever we have, it's just a wonderful thing to be able to share that and find out more and more. And then there are other planes of existence, which we haven't even spoken of, on a cosmic level, of an interplanetary level, all that stuff. And there are so many mansions, and everybody goes back to the many mansions.
Yes, many mansions.
There are many mansions. And
Emanuel Swedenborg.
Oh yes, he's got big
1700s Swedish scientist who was really into understanding spirit and talked extensively about it, and that's where we get the term the Summerland. So you have his understandings that he shared, extremely detailed.
Yes.
In terms of what it's like on the other side, what the houses are like, what the people are like, everything. The whole 9 yards.
And that's just one aspect.
And that's just one.
That's just one mansion, right? What the houses are like, it's just one mansion. So we have to be open to let people explore and evolve and do it safely and without fear, because people start to think they know everything, or that nobody can possibly know anything. Either way. Oh, I'm sorry, you can't know that, right?
Which is so interesting because next week I have on the schedule Tom Kratzley. We're going to be talking about super consciousness because he really loves Andrew Jackson Davis.
Yeah.
And he's been on the show before to talk about Andrew Jackson Davis, who was the Poughkeepsie seer, and however you want to say that. And he went into that state of what is known as super consciousness. And to some extent, we do touch that a bit when we move into the alcohol state, that state of grace. We touch in on that level of the super consciousness.
Right.
But Andrew Jackson Davis was able to kind of hold it, the maintenance of the level that goes on with that. So I think it'd be really cool for you guys to tune in next week for that particular show, because we're gonna move into the how, maybe a bit more of the how-to on that.
Oh, that's great.
Yes.
That'll be wonderful. Very wonderful. And just remember that, look up. If you find yourself in a cloud, remember sometimes a cloud can lead you somewhere. Like in the Bible, they had these clouds.
That's right. They did.
That led the Israelites.
Yes, when they were wandering in the desert.
They were wandering. And sometimes we wander. We particularly find ourselves into a wandering situation, and we can't think our way out of that cloud. But know that God is there.
Yeah, that manna shows up on the ground.
Yes,
to some extent.
Something will show up for you.
You're going to find
but
the manna.
You have to know that it can. You can't say it can't happen to me. I'm a nobody. Yes, you are a nobody. You are a God's child, though. So
you have this dichotomy that's within all of us. This understanding of I am nothing, I am something. But ultimately, what comes down to is you recognize that you are something, and that whether someone gives you a gold star or somebody says, "Here's your dot of you have you're not good at this. Here's your dot." And we can sometimes feel all spotted and speckled in our energy for how we feel other people are perceiving us, or they're that they don't like something about us, and then we start living from that place. But when we turn to God and into that God framework, when we remit things to God,
let go. It's called letting go.
Letting go, and it's almost like we have to. It's kind of like the Christian form of repentance to some extent, that we repent for seeing ourselves in that state, and we let that go. We go to God, and then it's as if those marks upon us fall off.
That's right.
And we're not living for someone else's disagreements with us or their gold stars that they might give us. But we just keep going to God.
That's
going to God, looking unto God in those moments.
That is the peace that gives you the peace, and that gives you, some people want you to feel guilty about everything. But all we have to do is go directly to God.
Right.
And we don't have to go to them.
Right.
To the person who says you should feel really guilty about this or that. If you are sincerely want to be in God's presence, you will do what you need to do. You'll look unto God and you'll say, thank you, thank you, thank you.
And there's a pause that happens. This happened the other day with me. I noticed that someone had hurt me in that sense, and I said, okay, I've pursued it. I've told them, and now I have to give this to God in those moments, because otherwise there'll be more words.
You'd be nurturing
something. So I said no, and then it's interesting what happened in that pause with God. I found peace that whether we were going to have further disagreement about this or not didn't matter.
No.
It didn't matter. And it's interesting how the energy dropped away, that I went to God and I said, I'm sorry for anything I may have done that may have caused this, but I am not going to be perpetuating this.
Right.
So that's where that remission, this isn't cancer remission. We're not talking about that. It's this understanding of we go and we partake in that invitation. sincerely. And
Mhm.
sometimes we come with a broken heart, or we
Yes.
come with a what's known as the contrite spirit,
Mhm.
right? We come with those, and that's that promise always that we're going to have the what some people term the spirit of the Lord, right?
Yeah.
It's the spirit of the Lord with us as the companion, and that we can always receive remission.
Mhm.
Remission is forgiveness, basically.
Yeah.
And we move into that state of peace and that state of grace, and things drop away.
Yes.
When
And you find
move into
yourself
that
doing
grace,
things
yeah,
that are really good.
yeah, because I noticed some things that happened in it, and other things were opened up because of it.
Mhm.
So if you find yourself in that situation, as sensitives, we tend to not want to engage in conflict. We don't feel successful in it somehow, but there's
Mhm.
a way to bring that to God,
Mhm.
not saying, oh, God, look at what they're doing.
Yeah.
It's not
Blame
like
them.
going to, it's like going to your parents and saying, Mom, he hit me, or he
Yeah.
did this to me, or he took my pencil, or like what's the, and some of those could be bigger problems, of course.
Mhm.
But it's that concept of, it's not tab failing.
Mhm.
It's moving into,
Right.
I see my side, I'm open to seeing more of their side, but ultimately I let this go.
Yes.
Yeah. So that happens when we look
Isn't that
unto
amazing?
God.
And
If
then
you go to God
it
with
just
things.
starts, the confusion starts to disperse.
Yeah.
So it's like a weather,
Mhm.
like clouds or something.
There is energetic weather. We should do a show sometime about energetic weather.
Yeah.
I
'Cause
think
there is
people
such a thing.
really appreciate it.
Because you can wake up and feel it.
Yeah, yeah.
There's something's wrong.
The
you know?
barometer has changed.
Yeah.
Something's going on energetically.
And you think it's from somebody else.
You think, well, sometimes it is. It's
Yeah.
you're getting alert for other people's weather patterns.
That's true.
But you can be such a sensitive that you can take it on yourself. You can
I
say,
know.
oh, there's a hurricane over there. Here comes a hurricane in me.
Right.
Versus saying, someone has a hurricane. Now I know what to do.
Mhm.
It's a different kind of
Wow.
connotation. But ultimately, we have to look unto God.
Mhm.
What an interesting thing. I hope you guys really enjoyed. Let us know if you enjoyed this particular episode and what you liked about it, and maybe how you're moving into more of that completion, that wholeness of self,
Yeah.
achieving your own Jerusalem, as it were, so that we don't have to be in conflict, that we can be more in the sense of peace, no matter what brokenness we might see in the world or in ourselves or in other people.
Because there's so much.
There's so much if we let that overwhelm us. But we're going to look unto God, look unto the laws of matter.
Mhm.
You almost forgot about that on page 14. Return the look of God. So the sight of a principle means that you're going to return the look of God, and that the laws of matter cease to hold me. I've written that down.
Oh, wow.
See,
we
leave
forget.
we leave you with that thought of, when we say look unto God, it is God's always looking.
Yes.
Always looking. And so it's not like
we're trying to grab. Hey.
it's not like you're pulling on your mom, and your mom's trying to talk to someone else. And you're like, Mom, I need to talk to you right now.
Yes.
It's not like that. God's always looking, God's always paying attention to you. It's not like you need to drag on their hand, the hand of God, to get the attention.
Right.
It is about returning the look.
That's right.
And that the laws of matter cease to hold me. Ba-boom.
That's right. And when you return the look, you get into that moment where it's, the one I am that I am.
Yeah.
In other words, you look at the I am and you suddenly feel the connection with the I am.
Yes.
So
and that is such an important aspect of remembering that's a big part of your role in all of this, is to return the look.
yes. And then facing God.
Facing God.
All of this.
Yeah, that whole page there about
Yeah.
it. That facing thee, I see no matter with its laws of mind. Deity looks toward me, asking only that I return the look.
That's right.
And at one point of my responsive gaze, the laws of matter cease to hold me. There's the exact quote.
Right.
Very good. Wonderful. Well, thank you so
So,
much, Mom, for being on the
Thanks
show.
for having me.
And we enjoyed having a spiritual conversation in front of you guys and exploring some of the things that we're exploring and
we are.
learning about and remembering in our souls the truth of these things, and that we hold them more dear to us because we love to tell that story of the soul.
Right.
So,
And remember that you don't actually have to tell a person. You can just think of them as a whole, complete being, and do that, and then let the thought go. The next time you see that person, there'll be a subtle change, and you can do it again.
that's right.
So it is a way of taking some God energy with you. And just by recognizing the God energy of another person, it seems like it activates.
Well, that's part of the namaste. The divine in me sees the divine in
There you go.
So you're looking into God, and that also means that you're looking into God in the other person.
Yep.
That's the
Yeah.
extrapolation of those
Right.
thoughts. So tune in next week. I have on my schedule Tom Kratzy. We're going to be talking about superconsciousness, especially as Andrew Jackson Davis understood it, and how we can apply that into our lives in the here and the now. And I do have my Monday nights mediumship development circle starting on January 31st. So if you want to get in on that, it's a 5-week series. So for the next 5 weeks, starting January 31st, all through February, we'll be meeting to develop mediumship. And it has, I typically do a class lesson in the beginning. We do a brief meditation, and we launch into message giving and practicing our mediumship and really growing those abilities. I've got a great group of people. There's just such a special, wonderful group. You can sign up for that on my website, willawhite.com. Hope to see you then. All right, everyone, take care. Bye-bye.